I'm Lily Adams, living with my husband, Ethan, in a small suburban house in Crestwood, Ohio. To everyone who looks at us, we have the perfect life: beautiful house, well-kept lawn, and a marriage that seems straight out of a picture-perfect photo album. Neighbors often compliment us on our ideal relationship, the kind you envy. But no one sees the cracks hidden beneath the surface. No one knows the truth. The truth is that our once passionate relationship has slowly turned into something toxic, something I've been too afraid to admit, even to myself. Ethan and I met 3 years ago at an art gallery opening, where I worked as an assistant curator. He was everything I thought I needed: confident, charming, and effortlessly captivating. His words felt like sweet promises, and I was swept away by his attention. Our first months together were magical. Every moment seemed to sparkle with possibility. We laughed, shared dreams, and built a life that felt as if it were meant to be. I thought he was my perfect match, but over time the charm wore off. The laughter began to fade, replaced by silence that grew louder with every passing day. Ethan became distant, withdrawing into himself. At first I thought it was just stress from work, or the pressure of life, but his behavior became harder to ignore. He started to criticize me for the smallest things: how I cooked, how I dressed, how I spoke. His words, once tender, now cut like knives. He became cruel in his tone, belittling me, making me feel like I was never good enough. I found myself constantly walking on eggshells, never knowing when I'd say or do something that might set him off. The man I had fallen in love with seemed like a distant memory. I tried everything to fix it, but nothing ever seemed to change. Every argument only pushed us further apart, and every silent treatment felt like a chasm between us. But the outside world saw us as the perfect couple, and I played my part too, hiding the hurt behind a smile. Then, just when I was beginning to believe this was my life now, unspoken pain and quiet sorrow, Ethan surprised me. He said he wanted to do something special for our first wedding anniversary. For a moment, my heart fluttered. Maybe this was it. Maybe he wanted to fix things, to remind me of the love we once had. Maybe this trip would reignite the connection we had lost. He suggested a romantic weekend getaway to a cabin in Blackwood Falls, the place where we had our first real date. I hesitated, unsure if I was hoping for too much, but part of me couldn't help but feel a spark of optimism. This could be the chance I'd been waiting for, the opportunity to repair what had broken between us. The morning of our departure, we packed the car in silence. The sky was clear, the sun just starting to rise, casting long shadows across the quiet streets of Crestwood. I tried to push away the unease growing in my chest. Maybe this trip would be the turning point. But as we drove toward Blackwood Falls, the air in the car felt suffocating, thick with tension. Ethan, who had once been so open and engaging, now sat stiffly beside me, barely glancing in my direction. His silence was heavy, his unease palpable. I glanced at him a few times, searching for any hint of the man I used to know, but his gaze remained fixed on the road. My heart sank. Was this trip just another futile attempt to hold on to something that was already slipping away? Was I hoping for something that no longer existed? As the miles passed, I couldn't help but wonder. Maybe this was the end. Maybe Ethan and I were too broken to fix. Maybe the connection we once shared had already been lost forever. After what felt like an endless drive, we finally arrived at Blackwood Falls, nestled deep within the heart of Shenandoah National Park. The place should have been a refuge, surrounded by towering trees, the air thick with the scent of pine, and the sound of the nearby waterfall offering a soothing backdrop. This was supposed to be our fresh start, a chance to reset, to find each other again. Instead, the beauty of the place only highlighted the weight in my chest. Ethan parked the car by a narrow trail that led to the falls. He turned to me and suggested we take a walk, a quiet moment in nature to reconnect. I agreed, though my heart wasn't in it. I was desperate to believe this could help, but the tension in the air was suffocating. We started walking in silence, the path winding through dense trees, the sound of rushing water growing louder with every step. The further we walked, the more I felt like an outsider in my own life, walking beside a man who was a stranger to me now. His silence was a wall, and I was afraid to ask what was behind it. The trees parted, and we reached the edge of the waterfall. The view was breathtaking, the water tumbling down the rocks with such force that it sent mist into the air. It should have been a moment of peace, but instead, my stomach churned. Ethan stopped walking, his figure silhouetted against the cascade. He didn't turn to me right away, his back to me as he stared out at the falls. "Lily," he began, his voice colder than I had ever heard it before. I looked up at him, sensing the shift in his tone, something darker, something final. "I've been thinking a lot lately." A knot twisted in my stomach. I braced myself, even though I didn't want to hear it. "I don't think I can do this anymore," he continued, his words cutting through the air like ice. "This marriage, it's not what I want." My breath caught in my throat, as if the wind had been knocked out of me. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice trembling. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was saying. I thought we came here to fix things, not to break them apart completely. But the finality in his voice, so calm, so cold, told me otherwise. Ethan turned to face me, his eyes empty. "Fix things? No. I came here to end things." Before I could even process the magnitude of his words, the anger that had been simmering inside him erupted. His hands, once the hands that held me, pushed me with such force that I barely had time to react. I stumbled backward, my feet slipping on the wet ground as I fell toward the edge. The roar of the waterfall grew louder, drowning out everything else, and for one terrifying second, I was weightless, suspended in time. Then the cold water enveloped me. The shock of the freezing water hit me like a hammer. It stole the breath from my lungs, and the current pulled me under without mercy. I flailed, desperate for air, but the water was relentless, spinning me, pushing me deeper. Panic surged through me, but in the chaos, a memory from my childhood flashed through my mind. My father, standing by a calm lake, teaching me how to swim. "Don't fight the water, Lily," he had told me. "Let it carry you." I closed my eyes, forced myself to stop struggling, and surrendered to the current. Slowly, I stopped fighting and let the water guide me. The cold, the fear, and the confusion faded as I focused on my breathing, on moving with the flow instead of against it. After what felt like an eternity, my feet finally touched the rocky riverbed. Bruised, breathless, and shaking uncontrollably, I dragged myself to the riverbank, my body battered from the fall. As I lay there, gasping for air, the reality of what had just happened crashed over me like the waterfall itself. Ethan, my husband, the man I had loved, had tried to kill me. Tears mixed with the water still running down my face, but they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of rage. Ethan thought he had finished me, but I was still here. And this was only the beginning. Lying on the muddy riverbank, I struggled to catch my breath. My chest heaves with each ragged inhale, the pain coursing through my body, sharp and unrelenting. My clothes are drenched, my skin scraped and bruised. But it's not the physical pain that consumes me. It's the emotional devastation that cuts deeper, twisting like a knife through my heart. Tears mix with the cold water still dripping from my face as the full weight of what happened sinks in. The man I thought I knew, the one I loved, is capable of murder. How had I been so blind? How could I have missed the darkness in him for so long? For the first time, I see Ethan clearly, not as the charming, loving husband I once adored, but as a cruel, calculated man willing to end my life without a second thought. But as the shock starts to subside, something else begins to stir inside me. A fire, a burning anger that consumes the sorrow. Ethan thought he had won. He thought he had killed me, that I would disappear into the cold, merciless water and never be heard from again. But I am still here, gasping for air, feeling the sharp edges of my survival. And that thought, being alive, when he believed he had destroyed me, fuels a fury inside me. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. He thought this was over, but it was only the beginning. My body trembles with the cold, with the fear, but also with a new, fierce determination. I can't stay here. I know Ethan will come back to check if his plan worked, and I can't risk being found. He must never know I survived. I need to disappear completely, to become someone who no longer exists in his world. I need to vanish, to leave behind the Lily he thought he'd silenced. Every movement is agony, but I push myself to my feet, ignoring the sharp pain in my limbs. The adrenaline pumping through my veins makes my steps shaky but purposeful. I walk along the riverbank, away from the place that nearly ended my life. Each step is an act of defiance, a declaration that I'm not done, that I'm not going to let him win. Time passes in a blur. The world around me is a mix of sounds: the rushing water, the rustling of the leaves, the thudding of my own heartbeat. Hours seem to stretch, my legs growing weaker with every step. But I keep moving. I can't stop now. Just as I start to feel the weight of exhaustion pulling at my body, I hear it, a car engine in the distance. The sound of it is faint at first, but it steadily grows louder, a beacon of hope in the otherwise empty landscape. I move toward the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. Please, let it be someone who can help. I step onto the road, barely able to keep my balance, and raise my hand, signaling for the car to stop. A rusted old Chevy Malibu pulls to a halt, and the driver, a man in his 50s with a kind face, looks at me with concern. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asks, his voice warm and steady. I don't know how I manage to speak, my throat raw, but I manage a shaky nod. "I need help," I say, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Please, take me to Woodbridge." Doesn't hesitate, seeing the fear and desperation in my eyes. "Hop in," he says, his voice reassuring. "We'll get you to safety." As I climb into the passenger seat, my body aches with every movement. But I'm relieved. I'm not alone anymore. I'm on my way to safety. But as the car pulls away from Blackwood Falls, I know this is only the beginning of what lies ahead. The journey is far from over, and the fight for my life is just beginning. The drive to Woodbridge felt like a blur. Every mile we covered seemed to take me further from Blackwood Falls, and closer to the daunting task ahead. The numbness in my body, from the fall and the mental toll of everything that had just happened, was starting to settle in. My heart still raced, and the flood of emotions, fear, anger, betrayal, pressed against my chest like a heavy weight. But I couldn't afford to break down. Not yet. John's Chevy Malibu hummed along the road, its old engine rattling like it had seen better days. But I wasn't in the mood to pay attention to anything but the mission. I knew the only way to get justice was to gather enough evidence to expose Ethan for who he truly was. But first, I needed to disappear. I couldn't go to the police right away. Ethan would spin a story, claim it was an accident, and they'd believe him. I couldn't risk that. "Here we are, miss," John said as we entered the small town. He parked by a quaint cafe in the heart of Woodbridge, and I gave him a grateful smile, though my mind was a million miles away. "Thank you," I said quietly, my voice barely a whisper. "I'll be all right from here." You sure? I could take you further. His concern was palpable, but I shook my head. No, I have someone who can help. I'll be fine. Thank you, really? John nodded, his graying hair shifting in the breeze. Take care of yourself, miss. And don't let anyone push you around, all right? I gave him a brief smile, stepped out of the car, and watched him drive away before turning to face the cafe. It wasn't much. Just a little brick building with warm light spilling out the windows. But it felt like a sanctuary compared to the storm I had just come from. I went inside, ordered a coffee to settle my nerves, and immediately reached for my phone. Sophie. She was the only person I could trust right now, the one person who would believe me without question. When she picked up, I barely managed to get the words out, the tremor in my voice betraying the calm I was trying to project. Sophie, it's me. I need help. Ethan, he tried to kill me. There was a moment of silence on the other end before her voice cracked with disbelief. What? Lily, what the hell happened? I told her everything. How Ethan had pushed me into the waterfall, how I had survived, and how I was now hiding in Woodbridge, far from him. Sophie listened without interruption, her concern and disbelief weaving into every word she said. You're safe now. Stay put. I'll take care of everything. True to her word, Sophie called back a few hours later with a plan. She had spoken to her aunt, who lived in Harrison Ridge, a small village far enough from the city that no one would think to look for me. It was isolated enough that I could stay hidden, away from prying eyes while I figured out how to bring Ethan down. I'll send you the address, Sophie said. Just get there. We'll figure the rest out. I thanked her and hung up, the relief of having someone in my corner washing over me. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give me the strength to keep going. Sophie's aunt's house was a peaceful, isolated cabin nestled on the outskirts of Harrison Ridge, surrounded by nothing but dense woods and silence. The perfect place to disappear. As I unpacked the few things I had, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the past few days bearing down on me. Physically, I was exhausted. My body still ached from the fall. But emotionally, I felt like I was running on fumes. I spent the next few days in a haze, recovering as best as I could. But I couldn't afford to sit idle. I needed to gather evidence. I needed to prove that Ethan wasn't just a man who'd snapped in a moment of weakness. I needed to expose him for the manipulative, cruel person he truly was. I sifted through my old emails, messages, and photos, looking for anything that could help. The digital trail we leave behind can be a powerful thing, and I had been diligent in documenting everything, even when I didn't realize how important it would become. I found pictures I had taken secretly, bruises from his earlier outbursts, marks that I had hidden out of shame. I found old messages where his tone was cold and mocking, belittling me for the smallest things. These were the signs I had ignored, the red flags that were there from the beginning. The worst part was realizing just how much I had been blinded by love. I had convinced myself that things would get better, that he was just stressed or going through a phase. But there was no more denying it now. The truth was staring me in the face, and I couldn't look away. Days passed, and the weight of what I was doing settled in. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. I had to be patient, strategic. Ethan had already reported me missing to the police, pretending to be the grieving husband. I could almost hear his voice, how convincing he would sound, how the officers would fall for his lies. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I couldn't let him. I stayed calm. After weeks of painstaking preparation, I finally meet with Cameron Walker, a lawyer specializing in domestic violence cases. He listens with a level of empathy I've never known from anyone in the legal world. His calm demeanor and sharp mind assure me that he is exactly who I need. He doesn't promise an easy fight, but he agrees to take me on as a client. Together, we begin the work of building a case against Ethan, gathering the photos, messages, and testimonies that will finally hold him accountable for his actions. Despite the relief of having a legal expert on my side, I still feel the weight of the battle ahead. Just as I begin to feel some semblance of control, my phone buzzes with a text. It's from Ethan. "You think you've won. You haven't seen the last of me." The words send a chill through my spine. It's a stark reminder that the danger is far from over. But instead of breaking me, the message strengthens my resolve. Ethan will not intimidate me. I won't back down. I'm no longer the woman he tried to kill. I am stronger, more determined than ever to make him pay for what he's done. The day of the trial arrives, and I stand at the courthouse, facing the culmination of everything I've fought for. I take a deep breath before walking into the courtroom. The tension is palpable, but I feel a quiet strength within me. This is it. This is the moment I've waited for. As I take the stand, I recount the horrors of my marriage, the emotional and physical abuse, the gaslighting, and the day he tried to end my life at Blackwood Falls. The words feel like a weight off my shoulders, and yet, each one is also a reminder of the pain I've endured. I look over at Ethan. His expression, cold and defensive. His lawyer tries to discredit me, twisting my words and suggesting I'm lying, but the evidence speaks for itself. The photos of the bruises, the threatening texts, the testimony from those who witnessed his cruelty, everything I've gathered is presented for the court to see. The truth is undeniable. Under the weight of the evidence, Ethan's facade begins to crack. I can see the moment his confidence starts to falter. He stammers, his carefully crafted lies falling apart. And finally, in a moment of desperation, he admits everything. "I tried to kill her," he confesses, his voice barely a whisper, but it echoes throughout the room. The silence that follows is deafening. The judge doesn't hesitate. 15 years, he declares, and just like that, the nightmare is over. The weight lifts from my shoulders, and I finally breathe freely for the first time in years. Victory is sweet, but it's not the end of my journey. Sophie and I decide to turn my pain into something meaningful. We create New Horizons, an organization dedicated to helping victims of domestic violence find the strength to rebuild their lives. The response is overwhelming, and soon we're offering counseling, support, and legal aid to women in need. As I stand before a crowd at one of our first New Horizons events, I realize something profound. I've not only reclaimed my life, but I've also found my voice, the voice I thought I had lost forever. I won't let anyone silence me again. This is my new beginning,